What is in the air today? We got Ty Harris clapping back at Indiana Fever / Caitlin Clark fans talking about y'all It's never a good sign when a player refers to another player on their team as y'all fave in a negative manner.
Something is seriously wrong inside women's basketball right now, and it has nothing to do with what's happening on the court. Two stories broke recently that pulled back the curtain on exactly what's going on behind the scenes, and once you hear the details, you're going to understand why so many people are losing faith in some of these players. On one side, you've got a Indiana Fever player going to war with one of the team's most loyal supporters, throwing shade at her own teammate in the process. On the other side, you've got a veteran player completely unraveling on social media after finding out she's been benched. Both situations are messy, both situations are telling, and both situations say a whole lot more about the current state of the WNBA than anyone in the league wants to admit. Let's get into it.
It starts with Ty Harris. Now, we should have seen the writing on the wall. Here's the thing. If you're going to play for the Indiana Fever, if you're going to, apologies. If you're going to play on a team that Caitlin Clark's on, be prepared for the scrutiny, be prepared for criticism, be prepared for not everybody liking you, be prepared for not everybody wanting to kiss your ass, be prepared for some people to call you trash, be prepared for some people to say you need to go, be prepared for it all. Be prepared for it all. One.
There's a version of reality that every single person connected to the Indiana Fever needs to understand before they lace up their sneakers, before they walk into that building, and before they even think about opening their mouths on social media. Playing alongside Caitlin Clark is not like playing alongside any other athlete in women's basketball right now. It is not even close. The level of attention that follows this woman into every arena, every city, every broadcast is unlike anything the WNBA has ever seen, and that attention does not stay focused only on her. It bleeds into everything. It touches every player on that roster. It touches the coaching staff. It touches the front office. It touches the ball boys, the arena staff, and the people selling hot dogs in the concession stands. When you are associated with Caitlin Clark, you are operating under a microscope that has no off switch.
If you're going to be a general manager of the Indiana Fever, if you're going to be a president of the Indiana Fever, let everybody on the team know instantly. Playing with Caitlin Clark comes with a different level of eyeballs. Playing with Caitlin Clark comes with a different level of attention. We don't want to bring negative attention into this locker room at all. Don't respond to fans online if it's not in a positive manner. Don't even give them the impression that they can interpret it as a negative comment towards Caitlin Clark. Don't do it. That's two.
Now, that should be a good thing. That should be the kind of spotlight that players dream about when Caitlin Clark drives traffic to every single game, when she fills arenas that used to be half empty, when she brings in television ratings that the league hadn't seen in years. Every single person in that building benefits. The players benefit, the coaches benefit, the franchise benefits, the entire league benefits. So the expectation, the very basic, very reasonable expectation is that the people riding that wave understand what comes with it, because here's what comes with it. Scrutiny, real scrutiny, the kind of scrutiny that serious sports fans bring with them, not the kind of casual observation that the WNBA had grown comfortable operating under for the better part of 3 decades. Real, intense, demanding fan behavior from people who watch real sports and have real standards and are not willing to just clap and smile because somebody told them to.
Now, in the offseason after Ty Harris got signed, the writing was on the wall. Ty Harris, chronically online, can't help herself but to clap back at people. Now, this was a response to non-Fever fans, non-Caitlin Clark fans. When she was first signed, people were calling her injury-prone. So I guess this kind of is a clap back to Indiana Fever / Caitlin Clark fans. Ty injury-prone? Anyway, we move. Ty Harris says, cap. Ty Harris follows that up a day prior. By the way, I've been hurt twice in my 6 years. A rolled ankle, sat out for 4 days. Then my first ever surgery beginning of last season. So I don't know why y'all saying I'm always hurt. She was also injured in the Connecticut series, but I guess we're going to forget about that, right? We're going to forget that she was in the playoffs when she was on Connecticut. So we have previous history of Ty Harris wanting to talk to fans.
That means if you have a bad shooting night, people are going to talk about it. If you say something questionable on social media, people are going to screenshot it, share it, and respond to it. If you make a decision that looks unprofessional or immature, people are going to call it out. And here's the thing that every player on this Indiana Fever roster needs to hear loud and clear. That is not a personal attack. That is just sports. That is the reality of competing at a high level in front of people who care deeply about what they're watching. You don't get to enjoy the benefits of playing in a packed arena in front of a massive television audience with Caitlin Clark driving all of that energy and then turn around and act like the fans who showed up for that experience don't have the right to form opinions about your performance. The Indiana Fever organization, from the top all the way down, had an obligation to make this crystal clear before any of this drama started. Before the first preseason game, before the first practice, before the first media availability, somebody in that front office should have sat every single player down and laid it out plainly. Playing on this team in this moment with this teammate is a different experience. The expectations are higher, the attention is more intense, the standards are more demanding, and your behavior online, your words on social media, your public reactions, they all carry more weight now than they ever have before.
Then comes today. Ty Harris responds to a deleted post by Stavros Forever, who, by the way, in case you guys aren't aware, Stavros is a legitimate Fever fan. He's a Caitlin Clark fan, but he also puts his money where his mouth is. He goes to games, he travels to games, he takes flights to get to arenas. Stavros is a true supporter in every shape of the word. Not saying that if you don't get tickets, you're not saying that. Stavros just goes above and beyond, right? Let's say that. So he puts out a post jokingly, sarcastically. Ty Harris finds offense to it, claps back at one of the biggest supporters of the Indiana Fever.
Every single person connected to this franchise should have had that conversation. Because if they had, maybe we wouldn't be sitting here talking about what just happened with Ty Harris. But they didn't. Or if they did, some people clearly weren't listening. And now here we are watching a situation unfold that was completely, entirely, 100% avoidable. The Indiana Fever doesn't need this kind of noise right now. Caitlin Clark doesn't need this kind of noise right now. The fans who showed up, who bought tickets, who tuned in, who made this whole movement possible, they definitely don't need this kind of noise right now. And yet, here it is, because some people still don't understand what room they're in. What happened next with Ty Harris is a perfect example of exactly what the organization should have been protecting against. And the frustrating part is that the warning signs were there long before any of this became a public story. This wasn't a surprise. This was a pattern. And patterns, when ignored, have a way of showing up at the worst possible moments.
Y'all be preying on people's downfalls. Y'all ain't gotta put down others to support y'all fave. I had a bad shooting night for sure, but we got the dub, and what does that help our team as a whole and whoever is your fave? We all trying to help in any way we can. Now, ignore the part that I had a bad shooting night for sure, but we got the dub, and what does that help our team as a whole and whoever is your fave? Forget that. That doesn't make any sense. Forget that. Ty Harris, nobody is preying on your downfall. We're hoping you succeed. You personally, specifically, we hope that you succeed. We hope that this team succeeds, all without Caitlin Clark, so she can get traded and go somewhere else. We don't pray for your downfall. We want you to have the ultimate success. Y'all ain't got to put down others to support y'all fave.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
Before we even get to what Ty Harris said this week, we need to rewind and talk about who Ty Harris is when she's online. Because the reaction that played out publicly wasn't some random out-of-character moment. It wasn't a one-time slip. It was the latest chapter in a very consistent story. Ty Harris is chronically online. She has a documented history of engaging with fans in ways that, to put it charitably, are not always the most professional. She finds the comments, she reads the replies, and when something rubs her the wrong way, she responds, not in a measured, thoughtful way, not in a way that diffuses tension. She responds in a way that adds fuel and then acts surprised when things heat up.
Moving on to Skylar Diggins. A little bit of pretense. Courtney Vandersloot, I'm playing the same position as Skylar Diggins. Quote, Skylar's ability to score the basketball, I think, makes it so that we can really play together. She'll hold it down at the point until I get back, and then when I get back, we'll share their position. Well, Skylar Diggins goes on her Instagram and says, now I'm coming off the bench. Cool. Then she gives us this gem.
And the crazy part about it all is that I've been so quiet. I've been so good and quiet. I've been so good and quiet.
When she first got signed by the Indiana Fever, it started almost immediately. People were questioning her injury history, calling her injury prone, suggesting that she might not be reliable enough to hold down a meaningful role. And look, that's fan talk. That's just what fans do. They debate roster decisions, they question signings, they wonder out loud whether a player can stay healthy. It's not personal, it's just noise. But Ty Harris took it personally. She went online and fired back directly. She put out a post addressing the injury narrative, breaking down her history, trying to set the record straight. On the surface, that might sound reasonable, but the pattern it reveals is the problem. Because athletes who feel a need to constantly defend themselves to strangers on the internet are athletes who are going to keep doing that. It doesn't stop. It escalates. And here's what made her response about the injuries even more interesting. She claimed that in her 6 years, she had only been hurt twice. A rolled ankle that cost her 4 days, and a surgery at the beginning of last season. She presented that as proof that she's not injury prone, that the criticism was unfair, but there's a detail she conveniently left out. She was also hurt during the playoffs when she was with Connecticut. That little piece of information somehow didn't make it into her defense. Now, that might seem small on its own, but it's the kind of selective storytelling that starts to paint a broader picture of how she handles uncomfortable truths. She doesn't ignore them, she engages with them, she argues about them, and she shapes the narrative in whatever way makes her look best, even when the full picture tells a different story. So heading into this season, the writing was already on the wall for anyone paying close enough attention. You had a player on one of the most scrutinized rosters in the league, a player with a known habit of engaging with online criticism, signing on to a team where the spotlight is hotter than anywhere else in women's basketball. That combination was always going to produce sparks. The only question was when and what it was going to look like when it finally blew up. And then came this week, and the answer arrived in a way that was somehow both predictable and still kind of shocking when you actually saw it play out. Because when Ty Harris finally clapped back in a way that crossed a very clear line, she didn't do it at some random anonymous account. She didn't go after a troll hiding behind a fake profile. She went after one of the Indiana Fever's most dedicated, most visible, most genuine supporters. And that changed everything about how this situation landed. Let's talk about Stavros forever for a second, because understanding who he is matters a lot when it comes to putting Ty Harris's response in context. Stavros is not some keyboard warrior sitting in his basement with an agenda. He's not a hater hiding behind an anonymous account trying to tear down the Indiana Fever. He is a genuine, committed, deeply invested fan of both Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever as a whole. He goes to games, not just home games. He travels. He gets on flights. He books hotels. He shows up in arenas across the country because he cares that much. He puts his money where his mouth is in a way that the vast majority of sports fans never do. That is the definition of a real supporter. So when Stavros put out a post that was clearly sarcastic, clearly joking, clearly not meant to be taken as a serious personal attack, the response it deserved was either nothing at all or maybe a lighthearted clapback that diffused the situation with some humor. What it absolutely did not deserve was what Ty Harris gave it. Ty Harris found that post, took offense to it, and responded in a way that immediately set off alarm bells for anyone paying attention to the dynamics on this team. She said, YALL be preying on people's downfalls. YAL ain't gotta put down others to support y'all fave. I had a bad shooting night for sure, but we got the dub. And what does that help our team as a whole? And whoever is your fave, we all trying to help in any way we can. There's a lot to unpack there. First, let's address the actual content of the message. Nobody is preying on Ty Harris's downfall. That's not what's happening here. The fans who showed up to watch the Indiana Fever, the fans who support Caitlin Clark, the fans who travel and spend money and invest emotionally in this team, they want every single player on that roster to succeed. Because when the players succeed, the team succeeds. When the team succeeds, Caitlin Clark succeeds. That's how sports work. Nobody sitting in those stands is secretly hoping Ty Harris shoots poorly so they can feel better about themselves. That framing is completely disconnected from reality. But here's the part that really matters. Here's the part that should have every Indiana Fever fan and every person paying attention to this team's internal dynamics genuinely concerned. Ty Harris referred to Caitlin Clark as y'all fave, not her teammate, not a fellow player she's grinding alongside every day. YALL fave. That is a distancing phrase. That is the language of someone who does not feel connected to, invested in, or aligned with the person she's talking about. When you call your own teammate y'all fave in a response that's clearly framed as a criticism of the fans who support that teammate, you are sending a message. You might not mean to send it. You might not even realize you're sending it, but you are absolutely sending it. And here's why that matters beyond just the optics. It feeds a narrative that has been building around this Indiana Fever team for months. The narrative that not everyone in that locker room is fully bought in. The narrative that some players are struggling with the dynamic of being on a team where one player commands all the attention, generates all the buzz, and drives all the traffic. That narrative may or may not be accurate in its full form, but every time a player says something like this publicly, it adds another brick to that wall. And eventually, that wall becomes something that's very hard to tear down. Then someone called her out on it. A fan directly told her that being online fighting with fans is unprofessional, that comments like this are toxic for team cohesion, and that making it sound like she has resentment toward Caitlin Clark and feeding into online narratives isn't a good look. Reasonable points, clearly stated. And Ty Harris's response? She doubled down. She said the team is good in the locker room. Trust her. The locker room is good. Everything is fine. Nothing to see here. But here's the thing about that response that doesn't add up. When a player feels the need to go online and publicly insist that the locker room is good, Trust her, the locker room is good. That is almost never a sign that the locker room is actually good. Because locker rooms that are actually good don't require public reassurance from players who are in the middle of social media arguments with fans. Locker rooms that are actually good don't produce the kind of noise and tension that's been swirling around the Indiana Fever all season. Locker rooms that are actually good don't have coaches making comments that undermine the star player. And locker rooms that are actually good definitely do not have documented 2-hour team meetings that suggest something significant was being worked through behind closed doors. Let's talk about that meeting for a second, because it's an important piece of context that Ty Harris conveniently glossed over in her insistence that everything is fine. Reports emerged that the Indiana Fever held a 2-hour team meeting at some point during the season. 2 hours. That is not a regular film session. That is not a standard tactical breakdown. 2-hour team meetings happen when there is something serious to address. They happen when there are tensions that need to be confronted. They happen when the coaching staff or the front office determines that something has gone wrong enough internally that it needs to be dealt with directly and at length. 2-hour team meetings are not the product of a locker room that is, as Ty Harris put it, good. And then there's the coaching situation, which adds yet another layer to this whole story. The dynamic between the coaching staff and Caitlin Clark has not been seamless. There have been moments, public moments, where the coach's behavior has raised eyebrows. Moments where it seemed like the star player was being undermined rather than supported. Moments where the spotlight seemed to be getting redirected in ways that didn't serve the team's best interests. When you combine that with the social media behavior from players, the team meeting, and the broader tension that's been simmering all season, the picture that emerges is not one of a locker room that is good. It's one of a locker room that is managing some very real, very complicated internal dynamics. Now, to be fair, every team has internal dynamics. Every locker room has its tensions and its adjustments and its personalities that don't always mesh perfectly. That's just the reality of professional sports. You take a group of competitive, driven, high-level athletes, you put them in a high-pressure environment, and you're going to have friction. That's normal. What's not normal, what's not acceptable, is when that friction spills out onto social media in ways that publicly undermine the team's best player and alienate the fans who make the whole thing possible. Here's where it gets even more frustrating. Ty Harris seems to genuinely believe that newer fans don't know what they're talking about, that they're falling for made-up narratives, that they're misreading situations that she has a better handle on, but the reality is almost exactly the opposite. The newer fans who have come to the WNBA through Caitlin Clark, the fans who grew up watching real sports with real standards and real accountability, those fans are not going to eat up whatever version of events gets handed to them. They're not going to smile and nod and accept the party line because the league has been serving it for years. They watch, they pay attention, they connect dots. And when a player says the locker room is fine while the evidence points in a completely different direction, those fans notice. And then came the comment that arguably said more about Ty Harris's mindset than anything else she posted that day. At some point during the back and forth, as more people started telling Ty Harris to log off and step away from social media, she responded with a question that is going to live rent-free in the heads of Indiana Fever fans for a long time. She said, "Why y'all keep telling me to log off? Oh, it's my day off. Athletes can't have conversations without people thinking I'm fighting." She followed that up by saying her life is blessed and highly favored. And while that's a lovely sentiment, it is also one of the most tone-deaf things a player in her situation could possibly say. Because here's the thing about a day off when you are shooting 31% from the field. Here's the thing about a day off when you are shooting 16% from three-point range. Here's the thing about a day off when your star teammate is in out of lineup dealing with a back issue, and the team needs every other player to step up and fill the gaps. You don't have a day off. You don't get to have a day off in the way she's describing it. Not when your numbers look like that. Not when your team needs more from you than you're currently giving. Elite athletes don't think about their time off the way Ty Harris described it in that post. Elite athletes, the ones who are genuinely trying to reach the next level, the ones who understand what it takes to compete at the highest standard, they use their off days differently. They're in the gym getting extra shots up, they're in the film room watching opponents, they're working on whatever part of their game is letting the team down. They're not on social media arguing with fans about whether they're fighting or just having conversations, because they don't have time for that. Because every single day is an opportunity to get better, and wasting that opportunity on social media, beef is not something that a player with championship level ambitions is willing to do. Now look, nobody is saying that athletes can't have social media accounts, or that they can't post things online, or that they need to be completely disconnected from the world on their off days. That's not the point. The point is the priority. The point is what you choose to spend your limited energy and attention on when you have time away from the team. And when you are shooting 31% from the field and 16% from three, the answer to what you should be doing with that time is not arguing with Caitlin Clark fans on the internet. It is absolutely, unequivocally not that. There's also something worth noting about the contrast that situation creates. While Ty Harris was online explaining why she has the right to be online on her day off, what do you think Caitlin Clark was doing? Caitlin Clark, who has had her own physical struggles this season with her back, who has been in and out of the lineup, who faces more scrutiny and more pressure than any other player in the league. Do you think she was online arguing with fans? Do you think she was posting about her right to take days off? Or do you think she was doing whatever she could to get her body right and stay sharp and be ready to compete? You already know the answer. And that contrast, that gap in approach and mindset, is exactly what separates the players who define eras from the players who are just along for the ride. But as significant as all of this is, it's only half the story of what happened this week. Because while Ty Harris was busy creating a mess on one side of the WNBA world, something entirely different and somehow even more visually striking was happening on the other side. And it involved a veteran player who, by all accounts, completely lost her composure on social media in a way that had people genuinely checking their screens twice to make sure they were seeing what they thought they were seeing. Skylar Diggins Smith is a legitimate talent. Let's establish that before anything else, because what happened this week is not a conversation about whether she can play basketball. She absolutely can. She has had a long and impressive career that speaks for itself. This is a conversation about how she responded to a professional decision that she clearly did not see coming and clearly did not handle well. And the response, captured on video and shared on Instagram for the entire world to see, is one of those moments that is very hard to walk back once it's out there. Here's the background. Courtney Vandersloot made some comments about how she and Skylar Diggins Smith could potentially share the point guard position. She said that Skylar's ability to score the basketball makes it so that they can play together. She mentioned that Skylar would hold things down at the point until she got back, and that once she returned, they would share responsibilities at the position. On the surface, that might sound like a collaborative, team-first kind of statement. The kind of thing players and coaches say all the time when managing roster decisions, but what it actually communicated, at least to Skylar Diggins Smith, was something much more specific. It communicated that she was being moved to the bench, that Courtney Vandersloot was going to be the starting point guard, and that the decision had already been made without what seemed like a direct private conversation with Skylar about it first. Now, being benched is never easy. Being told that your role is changing, that you're no longer in the starting lineup, that someone else is going to be taking your spot, is one of the hardest things that can happen to a professional athlete. especially for a veteran, especially for someone who has started for most of her career and who takes enormous pride in what she does, the emotion that comes with that kind of news is real and valid and completely understandable. Nobody is dismissing the difficulty of being in that situation, but what you do with those emotions matters. And what Skylar Diggins Smith chose to do with them was go on Instagram. She posted first in text, "Now I'm coming off the bench." Short, direct, clearly not a happy reaction. And then she followed that up with a video. And the video is where things got genuinely concerning. Not because of anything she said specifically, but because of the way she looked, the way she carried herself, the energy that was coming off of her in a way that was very hard to watch without feeling some level of secondhand stress. In the video, she said, and this is pretty close to verbatim, "And the crazy part about it all is that I've been so quiet. I've been so good and quiet. I've been so good and quiet." She repeated that phrase, the same phrase, twice in a row. I've been so good and quiet. Now, when someone repeats themselves like that, when the same words come out of their mouth twice in the same breath, it usually means one of two things. Either they're genuinely trying to emphasize a point and drive it home, or the words are coming faster than the thoughts behind them and something emotional is taking over. Watching the video, it is very clearly the second one. The optics of the whole thing are hard to shake. And optics matter whether we like it or not. When you are a professional athlete and you go on social media while you're clearly in an emotional state, when the video you post reads as frantic or unraveled or not quite put together, that becomes the image people carry forward. That becomes the clip that gets shared. That becomes the version of you that lives online long after the original moment has passed. And for Skylar Diggins Smith, a player with a long career and a real legacy in women's basketball, that is not the version of herself she should want floating around. There's a comparison that comes to mind when you watch that video, and it's not a flattering one. There have been other athletes and public figures who have gone on social media in moments of obvious distress, in moments where their composure had clearly slipped, and the result was never made the situation better. It never solved the problem. It only added more noise, more drama, more ammunition for people who were already looking for reasons to question the person's judgment. Skylar Diggins Smith is too talented and too experienced to be handing people that kind of ammunition. Here's the other thing about going public with a reaction to a benching decision. Once you do that, you have made a private professional matter into a public spectacle. And the moment you do that, the story is no longer about the decision itself. The story is about your reaction to the decision. The story becomes about whether you can handle adversity professionally. The story becomes about whether you're a team player or someone who prioritizes their own feelings over the team's dynamic. Those are not stories that benefit Skylar Diggins Smith. Those are not narratives that help her case for getting back into the starting lineup. If anything, they make the coaching staff's decision look even more justified in hindsight. And then there's the thing she said about being quiet. She said she'd been so quiet. She said she'd been so good and quiet. And that framing is interesting because it suggests that in her mind, being quiet was a sacrifice she'd been making, that she had been holding something back, holding some frustration or some resentment or some disagreement at bay, and that the benching news was the thing that finally broke the dam. That is a revealing thing to say, because it tells you that whatever she was being quiet about, it was building. It wasn't nothing. There was something underneath the surface that she had been sitting on, and rather than addressing it internally, rather than having a direct conversation with the coaching staff or the front office, she let it build until a social media post became the release valve. That's not good for the team. That's not good for her. And it's definitely not good for the broader perception of the organization and the culture inside that locker room. Take a step back from both of these stories for a second. Take the Ty Harris drama. Take the Skylar Diggins situation. Pull them apart from their individual details and look at what they have in common. At their core, both of these situations are about professional athletes in the women's basketball space responding to pressure and adversity in ways that are public, emotional, and ultimately damaging to themselves and to the broader conversation around the league. And that pattern is not random. It is pointing at something real. The WNBA is in the middle of the most significant moment in its history. The Caitlin Clark era, the surge in viewership, the increase in ticket sales, the flood of new fans, all of it represents an opportunity unlike anything the league has ever had before. An opportunity to establish itself as a serious, must-watch sports product. An opportunity to convert casual observers into lifelong fans. An opportunity to build something that lasts beyond any single player or any single season. That opportunity is real and it is right there on the table. But opportunities can be squandered, and the way they get squandered in sports is through exactly the kind of dysfunction and noise that we've been talking about today. New fans, the fans who came through Caitlin Clark's door, the fans who have been watching real sports their entire lives, are watching all of this happen. They are watching a player publicly undermine her own teammate using dismissive language on social media. They are watching another player have what looks like a very public emotional unraveling over a coaching decision. They are watching a league that has spent years preaching professionalism and solidarity produce moment after moment that looks like neither of those things. And some of those fans are going to start asking questions. Questions like whether this is really the product they want to invest their time and attention and money into. Questions like whether the culture inside these organizations is one keeps insisting it is. Questions that the league cannot afford to leave unanswered or dismissed. Here's something else worth thinking about. The players who are struggling the most visibly with this moment, the ones who are responding to pressure with social media outbursts and public emotional displays, are largely the ones who built their careers in the old WNBA. The one with smaller audiences and lower stakes and less intense scrutiny. And that's not a knock on what they built during that time. It's just an acknowledgement of the fact that this moment is different. The stakes are different. The audience is different. And the expectations that come with this new landscape are different. Some players are adapting to that reality. Some players are embracing it and using it as motivation, and some players are clearly struggling with it in ways that are becoming increasingly hard to ignore. The Indiana Fever have a chance to be something special. They have a chance to be the team that this era of women's basketball is built around. They have the player, they have the attention, they have the moment. What they need is everyone around that player to step up and meet the moment with the kind of professionalism and focus and competitive hunger that the situation demands. Every social media argument that spills into public view, every emotional reaction that gets posted on Instagram, every piece of drama that pulls the conversation away from the actual basketball is a brick taken out of the foundation that they're trying to build. The same goes for every team in the league. This is not just an Indiana Fever problem. This is a culture problem. This is a maturity problem in some cases. This is a problem of players not fully grasping what kind of moment they are living through and what it is going to take to make the most of it, because the moment will not wait. The audience will not be patient forever. New fans who showed up excited and invested can become disengaged fans very quickly when the thing they're watching stops feeling like a serious sports product and starts feeling like a reality show with a basketball court as the backdrop. Ty Harris needs to put the phone down and pick up a basketball. 16% from 3 is not a stat that gets better by arguing with fans online. Skylar Diggins needs to take a breath, have a real conversation with her coaching staff, and find a way to channel the competitive fire that made her great into something productive rather than something that ends up as a screenshot shared thousands of times. And both of them, along with everyone else connected to women's basketball right now, need to understand that the eyes watching this moment are not going away. They are growing. And those eyes are going to form opinions based on exactly what they see. Right now, some of what they're seeing is not great. The question is whether that changes before it starts to matter in ways that are much harder to fix. Here's the honest truth about everything that happened this week. None of it was inevitable. None of it had to happen the way it did. Ty Harris didn't have to respond to a sarcastic post from a loyal fan. She didn't have to use language that distanced her from her own teammate. She didn't have to insist that the locker room is fine while the evidence said otherwise. She didn't have to justify being on social media on her day off instead of being in a gym working on a shooting percentage that desperately needs improvement. All of those things were choices, and the choices that players make in moments like these are the ones that define how they're remembered when the season is over. Skylar Diggins didn't have to go on Instagram the moment she found out she was being benched. She didn't have to post a video that gave millions of people a window into her most unguarded, most unsettled emotional state. She didn't have to make a private professional matter into a public spectacle. Those were choices too, and they were the wrong ones, made in moments when the right choice was to step back, breathe, and deal with the situation like the veteran she is supposed to be. The WNBA has been handed something rare, a genuine cultural moment, a surge of energy and attention that most leagues would do almost anything to manufacture. The players, the coaches, the front offices, all of them have a role to play in either protecting that moment and building on it, or letting it slip away through the kind of avoidable drama that pushes new fans back out the door they just walked through. The talent is there, the platform is there, the audience is there. What needs to match those things is the mindset, the discipline, the professionalism, the understanding that this is bigger than any single player's feelings about their role or their social media following or their right to post on their day off. Women's basketball deserves better than what we saw this week. The players who are doing the work, the ones who are showing up every day and competing and carrying themselves with the kind of dignity and focus that this moment demands, they deserve better than having the conversation hijacked by drama that should have stayed private. And the fans, the ones who showed up, who bought in, who made all of this possible, they deserve better than being told the locker room is fine while everything visible suggests that it isn't. The season is still going. There's still time to change the narrative. There's still time for Ty Harris to let her game do the talking and put the phone away. There's still time for Skylar Diggins to come back from the bench with a chip on her shoulder and remind everyone exactly why she's been one of the best players in this league for years. There's still time for the Indiana Fever to become what they have the potential to become. But that time is not unlimited. And every week that passes with this kind of drama in the headlines is a week where the thing that actually matters, the basketball, takes a backseat to noise that nobody needed to hear. Think about that the next time one of these players opens their phone to respond to a fan who isn't worth their attention, think about what they're choosing and think about what they're giving up to make that choice.